we head out for our full-day tour of the world-famous Hermitage Museum. And we get to the Winter Palace that was built first for Elizabeth and then Catherine the Great. All around the Hermitage you find some of the greatest buildings of St. Petersburg. This is called Palace Square. In the center is the Alexander Column, and it's a frequent site of military marches and parades, and it's got quite a history. You see the grand facade of the Winter Palace, which contains the main collections of the Hermitage Museum. This column is higher than the column in Vendôme Square in Paris, higher than Trajan's column in Rome. It's over 150 feet tall. It's a granite monolith. This square is very much the historic center of the Russian Empire, for it was the home of the Tsar, and also around the square you have the offices of the Army, the Navy, the Finance Ministry, and the Foreign Ministry. So the entire government was run from this one central palace square. And you could say that the Russian Revolution began and ended here, for in 1905 a group of protesting workers were massacred in Bloody Sunday, and in 1917 the Bolsheviks stormed the Winter Palace and took over the government. Scene of great historic importance. Some sailors sitting down playfully pointing their rifle at us. Well, Russia is a much more peaceful country today. Walking freely through the streets and mingling with the local Russians, you realize that any possibility of World War III between America and Russia is impossible nowadays. We're allowed to bypass this huge line of people from the cruise ship waiting to get into the Hermitage because we're a much smaller group, more mobile, and in we step to the State Museum of the Hermitage. One of life's great experiences. And we'll have a full-day visit inside with Olga taking us around. We're going to show you some of the highlights in this program, and then in another program of World Traveler we will continue our visit inside the Hermitage. We're visiting the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, and we fortunately have an excellent local guide, Olga, who has been with us for our several-day tour here, and she's taking us through on a full-day tour of the Hermitage Museum. So come along with us and look at some of the finest art treasures in the world's largest art museum.
So we are first doing the Winter Palace. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the Ambassador's Staircase, the main entrance to the Winter Palace. The residence was built in 1762, architect Rastrelli. This is the so-called Russian Baroque style, with lots of paintings, plafond, for example, in the ceiling, which shows the gods of Olymp. The room also has beautiful moldings and gilded moldings in the sides of the walls, gilded bronze chandeliers, and mirrors in the walls which elusively widen the room. The typical design of Rastrelli are also marble stairs, banisters, and the room is very decorative. It is called an ambassador's staircase because it was in this room that foreign ambassadors in this staircase that they would make all the official receptions.
Before we leave, let's somehow stop at the bookstore. I need to get some books for some friends.
I understand. So what we do is after we do the first half of the tour, I will take you downstairs where they sell books and where they have the cafeteria and souvenir shopping is in one area. And so you will be able to spend 1 hour doing all kinds of purchases and also taking care of your souvenirs here. Okay. Now we are in the central rooms of the Winter Palace. They are the so-called gala or state rooms of the Russian Tsars. So the main ceremonies were taking place here. And the Hermitage is famous for its tradition of having very beautiful exhibitions, which they renew every 2 or 3 months. First of all, let me tell you about the word Hermitage. It means a solitary place. It's a translation from the French word hermit, the hermit who lived in seclusion, a person who lived in seclusion. And the reason why the museum received this name is because Catherine the Great of Russia found this a very charming word. It's just she liked the word. And then she also pretended to be a very extravagant Tsarina. She liked a very luxurious lifestyle. So what she did, she purchased thousands and thousands of masterpieces of art, and she was developing picture galleries here. At the same time, she, like every woman, she was a single lady. She was changing men quite often. Some of them were Russians, some were foreigners. And she wanted to be extravagant like every woman. She wanted to say something special, you know. And you know that women in their correspondence, they sometimes want to show a little bit that they're a little bit lonely, you know, but especially when you are writing to a man. And so what she would write in one of her letters was, "Only myself and mice can admire the art treasures." Okay, so that was sort of inviting, but the word spread, and she started calling her art galleries with the word hermitage, because she presented herself like a hermit in this beautiful space. And so what we are going to do now is we will begin our tour with the hermit's dwelling of Catherine the Great, but later it developed into this beautiful museum. This is the so-called Field Marshal's Hall. And the name came from the fact that it's one of the staterooms where the Russian field marshals had their sessions and discussions. Before the fire of 1837, the room was decorated with the bas-reliefs of the Russian field marshals. They were never restored after the fire. However, the gilded bronze chandeliers survived, and they still resemble of the original purpose of the room. They have martial symbols, the shields, helmets, swords, and they are the chandeliers made in Russia, the work of Russian craftsmen. The carriage, gilded wooden carriage, which you see here, belonged to Catherine the Great of Russia, and it's called the large carriage. Altogether, Catherine had about 50 as beautiful carriages for summertime, for wintertime. Same as some people collect cars nowadays, they were collecting carriages in the past. And now we are in the pavilion hall of Catherine's picture galleries. So the whole arrangement was the room for entertainment, where the visitors would be served drinks and some lemonade and fruit. And then when after they came, for example, here, it was used for the entertainment parties, but only private, for very selected members of the court. And after having entertainment, listening to music, the guests would either walk through the picture galleries or go out into the gardens, which were gardens even in the winter time, because they were roof gardens, and the whole building was for the entertainment purposes. Now the stables were below, so it was everything. You could go down and see the horses or walk here, so a little bit of everything. Now this room had all kinds of rarities. For example, the mosaic floors is one of few copies in the Hermitage And now we are in the early 16th century room. This is already coming close to the Renaissance period in Italian art. And even despite the traditions with the Russian Tsars to acquire mostly religious paintings from Italy, there are some portraits, such as Lorenzo Costa, the woman's portrait, which is the beginning of secular painting in Italian art. So this is another very famous masterpiece in the Hermitage, and the only work of Michelangelo Buonarroti in Russia. This is the Crouching Boy, which was meant for the tomb of Lorenzo Medici the Magnificent, and the sculptures there were to represent pain, grief, sorrow, and this is a pain representing sculpture. It was never completed. The hands and the feet of the boy are not finished, but still you can feel that Michelangelo was the genius in showing man and his feelings. So it's very emphatic, very spiritual sculpture. We are starting our tour of the Impressionists from this room. So in the rooms you will see this chronologically arranged. Barbizon School, then there will be Degas, Renoir, Auguste Renoir, Claude Monet, Cézanne, Van Gogh, and further on you will see a small gallery. It sort of separates Impressionists from the Post-Impressionists. So there will be Picasso, Matisse, and more artists of the 20th century.
They have the best collection of Matisse outside of France. You'll see Impressionists, you'll see the Italian Renaissance masters, highlights of Rembrandt, as well as sculpture and some modern works by Matisse and others.